Hello, and welcome to the Sunday Sober Snack. This is an offshoot of the Chasing Heroin podcast. My name is Janine. After 15 years of gnarly active addiction that left me homeless and in and out of jails, I've now been sober since 2015. The Chasing Heroin podcast is stories, both mine as well as guests that I interview, are stories of active addiction and sobriety, our journeys into recovery, what those look like, told and shared in a way that you can listen. And if you are someone that is still using or drinking, you can pick up something that is possibly potentially helpful for you on your journey. And if you've been in recovery for a while, we are always talking about ways to enhance the quality of our lives in recovery. I always learn new things from my guests, even at 9.5 years sober. The goal of all of my recovery content, my speaking, even a lot of what I say in classes, is to inspire and empower you, the recovering alcoholic addict, to create and live the highest vision that you have for your life, because I truly believe that we are in an advantageous position in life as alcoholics, addicts in recovery, because of what we have learned. The insights and the lessons that we learned in addiction, in recovery, when leveraged in sobriety, put us so far ahead of the game. We are the lucky ones. I believe that, but I didn't always believe that. I came out of my addiction feeling like such a loser, which is why today we are going to talk about specifically rebuilding self-esteem in sobriety. And you don't just have to be in early recovery for this to affect you. Last year, I thought my husband and I may split up. He was using and had been using for a while, and I was facing the possibility of being single again. I had 8 years sober. I had owned a business. I live in this nice place. And I still, when I thought about dating again, was like, oh my gosh, like I was right back to the who's going to go out with me. I've been to jail a million times. I have this crazy history. I don't have good credit because of my addiction. Like all of those old things were still affecting my self-esteem last year. And not even just people in recovery. Feel free to share this with a friend of yours that could use a boost of self-esteem now. I mean, coming out of a divorce, getting fired, not getting into your dream college, like life leaves a mark, life can take a toll on all of us. And we can all come out of different situations feeling a little beat up. And my goal is to share with you guys the things that I have done over the years to rebuild my confidence and my self-esteem. Today, I'm going to give you guys 3 specific, easy, free, immediately implementable ways to increase your self-esteem and to actively, consciously work on rebuilding confidence. So the first one, you are going to Google positive character traits. I also have one in the show notes on YouTube. This is in the show description. I want you to look at that sheet. You're going to go through, circle, or write down, whatever is the best way for you to keep track of this stuff, is if it's the notes app in your phone, if you're just writing it down in a notebook, whatever. Circle all of the ones that describe you. And this is not the time to be humble. I'm sure you have a fair amount of humility already, especially if you just got out of the drunk tank for a DUI or you just lost your job. Or like I said, at 8.5 years, it still plays with me a little bit in the back of my mind. Like I did all this crazy stuff, right? So this is not the time to be humble. I'm sure you have a fair amount of humility. The traits that we are looking at are unrelated. And this is really important. The traits that we are looking at and examining and acknowledging are unrelated to your appearance, your roles in life, or your achievements. So it's not going to be mom, employee, singer, teacher, actress, engineer, and it's not going to be pretty, thin, strong. It's not going to be related to your appearance. It's not going to be related to your roles or your achievements. Graduated law school, none of that stuff, because coming out of active addiction or alcoholism, we have often lost all those things, right? You may not feel attractive anymore. You maybe got fired. Like all of those things are things that can go away, that we can lose. I want to focus on the things that are inherently a part of you that you did not lose because they cannot be lost. I am smart. And though I shot a lot of methamphetamines and you would think I'm super fried, I'm still actually very smart. I can read well. I can speak well, right? Like I'm eloquent. I have integrity with money. If somebody drops a 5, like I'm going to chase them down. I have integrity with money. Those things can't be taken away. They weren't present in my addiction, but those are who I really am, right? Because the addiction is not who we are. The addiction is the disease. So when you are not active in your addiction, What are the things that you were born with that you know are good? And if you're really struggling, ask somebody in your life, ask a friend or a family member who really cares about you and supports you, and say, if you had to, give me some of these things on this list, what am I? Punctual. Punctual is a good one from someone that is not punctual, right? Like, I kind of am now. I had to be when I was taking the bus. Thank God I got a little bit better. But if you are someone that is like 15 minutes early is just your standard, that's a thing to acknowledge. So go through the list, circle all the things, and every night for 21 days, I want you to write down the ways that you saw those attributes in your life that day, the ways that you showed up with those character traits. I was on time today for this meeting. If one of the ones is accountable, I was accountable today at work. I made a mistake and I owned up to it. Just all of the ways that those character traits showed up in your life that day. And what we're doing is we are reminding ourselves of who we really are, despite the mistakes we've made, who we really are. And what we're doing is we're taking inventory of what we still have, because it's very easy after addiction, after alcoholism, after a loss of some sort, to lament what we've lost and think about all the things that we lost and we messed up. But we want to take inventory of what we still have. And if you are alive, you still have a lot. You still have all of those character traits that you can start to rely upon. And that is the foundation from which we rebuild those things that make you you, that make you unique. Those things cannot be taken away from you. And then the neuroscience behind that a little bit too is there's something in our brains called the RAS, the reticular activation system, and we tell it what to look for. That's why in a really loud, crowded room, if somebody yells your name, you hear it because your name has significance to you. And the RAS filters out all of the superfluous information in the environment, because at any given moment, we are taking in a lot of information and we would go insane if we took all of it in at once. So the RAS allows us to filter in just what's important, but we train the RAS. This is also why I'm a fan of taking chips and taking tokens and having them somewhere where you can look at them and see, I'm a person in recovery. I had 30 days, like I had 60 days. And then you start to look for that stuff during the day. So we are training your RAS to start to recognize the good things in you daily. Second thing we're going to do after that 21 days is over, every night for 21 days, you're going to make yourself a promise that you write down for the next day. These are not huge promises. These are, I will wake up at 7:30 a.m. You're going to write it down. I will go to the morning meeting at my old rehab. I will go to the grocery store and buy food to make for the week. That's a huge one. I don't even do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I will email my old boss and see if they're hiring. Whatever. We are going to write down a promise, just one, to make the next day. I'll make my bed. That's a huge one. I still don't even do that. Whatever. Something like that. Self-esteem is built on the promises that you keep to yourself. What you're doing is showing yourself you are someone you can count on. You can rely on you. And that specific part of esteem took a massive hit in addiction, alcoholism, because how many times did you say, this is it, I'm done, tomorrow I'm not using, tomorrow I'm not drinking, and then you did anyways. The feedback loop there is, you're not someone you can rely on. I let me down every single day, right? And so we need to start to undo that and rewire that. Fortunately, we can rewire the brain. And this is another way that we do it. So second way is I'm going to write down a promise every single night. And then the next day, keep it. That night, say, I kept my promise to myself. Here's my promise for tomorrow. And we just start recording the ways that you show up for yourself. The third one, the last one, is based on one of the coolest things I have ever heard. So a lifer in an Alabama prison, a guy doing life, shared this with a guy named Damon West, who was in prison and is out. And the lifer told Damon West this, who actually then shared it with the coach of Clemson, the football coach of Clemson. That's where I heard it. But 3 things: a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. You put each one of those things in hot water, something different happens to each one. An egg becomes hard-boiled. A carrot softens and becomes malleable, flexible, bendable. A coffee bean doesn't change. A coffee bean energizes the water. Of those 3 things, you have a choice of what you could be. When things get tough, when the water gets hot, right, so to speak, when your environment heats up a little, do you want to become hardened? Do you want to become soft, somebody that people could take advantage of? Or do you want to take control of the circumstances and you energize and change the situation? So it's this way to move out of a place where we are at the whim, we're at the mercy of external circumstances versus we are the person that can energize and change the circumstances. And so I want you to start to look for ways daily where you can be the energy in the situation, where you can help the situation. And if you are in sober living, you have a lot of opportunities to be the change you wish to see, right? The Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see. Bonus points if it's a place where you feel annoyed, like if it's a place where you feel beat down, like my sober living. I was annoyed living there. I'm so grateful for it. Wouldn't have done it any other way. But we all know sober living poses its own challenges. And the sober living that I was in was actually primarily for mental health, even more so than addiction and alcoholism. And I was living with a lot of people that were really struggling mentally, and it showed. It showed in their behaviors, and it was sometimes difficult to be in that environment. And it also made me feel really bad about myself because I was in that environment. And I was 34, right? I didn't get sober till I was 34, and I hadn't finished college, and I was super smart, and I did really well in school, but then I ended up quitting college. So there were all these things that I already felt like a loser about. And then I felt like, yeah, and then look at where I am. I obviously really am. Like, look at where I live. My other friends are buying houses, getting married, becoming partners in law firms. And I'm sharing a bunk bed at 34 years old with seriously mentally ill people who probably aren't ever going to work again, right? And that is how I started to feel and identify also. Like, there's this portion of the world that has been dismissed and forgotten and does not contribute to society. I am now that, and it's a horrible way to feel. So in that exact environment is where I started to try to be the change and give back to the people that I was living with, even if it annoyed me. And I always tell this story in particular. There was we had a refrigerator in the sober living, and it had probably been donated in like 1988. And the freezer had become completely frozen to the point where there was just a giant block of ice, and there was a tiny little bit of a corner where we were all jammed like our, food stamp frozen peas, like this much of a space. And the rest was just an ice block. And every time I opened that freezer, I was like, damn it. And I would slam it. And I was so annoyed. Months go by, and I thought about starting to actually be the energy in the room. Can I uplift the room instead of depending on it to take care of me? Can I become someone who for once in my life can take care of someone else? Can I energize the space? And I Googled how to defrost a freezer. I have since then learned that actually newer models just have a defrost button. But again, this thing was from like 1988, and it did not have a defrost. And you unplug it, you boil pots of water, and like starting with a smaller pot, put it up in that little hole, and basically you just melt the ice and it gushes out and you have to clean it. This took me like, I don't know, 5 hours or something. And of course my roommates are walking by like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, giant beach towels and mopping this stuff up. But I did it. I defrosted the freezer. And I remember after I did that thinking, I did something like in a house. Because also as a woman, part of my self-esteem is that I don't feel like super domestic. And I definitely didn't back then, right? After, living in a bush, I didn't feel like some domestic lady that could, cook someone dinner. And I felt like, damn, I did that, dude. Like I did something in the kitchen. I defrosted this freezer. And even though it sounds kind of silly and small, it really did help me feel better that day. And so I want you guys to start to look for places where you can become the change. You can energize the environment. I had this woman that worked for me at my studio, and COVID was hard. It was hard on all of us that worked there. And we built this amazing little family though. And there was this one chick that worked there in particular, my friend, and it wasn't her dream job. She wanted to maybe go back to school or have kids or, do something different. It wasn't her dream job. She liked it, but it wasn't her dream job. And I'm only sharing that because it doesn't have to be the thing you want to do, right? For you to like really make a positive impact. For every shift that she came in, she worked the front desk. She would write funny things on the whiteboard. We would write down what people need in class. And she would, I remember one day it was like, will Janine talk about her dad today? Yes or no? And of course it was yes. Instagram has like the funny filters, and she would film people while we were working out, like some of the women, and put like funny filters on them and post it. And she brought such a joy to that environment that it uplifted the environment every day. And it made her feel good too, right? Because like everyone, she was human. She beat herself up about not taking as many classes as she should or whatever. But when she showed up in that place and she was the change and she was the energy every day, we really valued it. And I know that that energy went back to her too. Be the coffee bean in your environment. Bonus points if it's an environment that drives you insane. Can you be the change? All three of those things, free, easy. You can start them today. List of character traits, write down for 21 days where you see those character traits showing up, where you are displaying those, unrelated to role, appearance, or achievement. Making promises to yourself nightly that you keep the next day. These don't have to be massive. And be the change in your environment. Give back to someone in your world in some way. Stay late and help somebody clean up. Whatever. If you're the only one with a car and sober living, give somebody a ride. I hope those 3 steps were helpful. They've been really helpful for me, and we'll see you guys again next week.